This episode of Dorking Out is brought to you by The Daily Bugle, New York's most trusted tabloid newspaper, with morning and afternoon editions 5 days a week.
And the number 40. According to Hollywood, after 40 episodes, our podcast is now officially old enough to play a grandmother.
Houston, flight is go.
Myla, let's go. STM. Safety contact.
From Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's The Dorking Out Show with Christopher Allen Smith and Sonia Mansfield. Welcome to episode 40 of Dorking Out, a podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories and culture that we love. That means movies and TV, books and war and peace, and podcasts, and everywhere else you find stories that interest you. This is the Dave Chappelle is better than Amy Schumer edition, and that's okay. With me today is my co-host, professional writer, and author of The Sonia Show, and fellow reader of War and Peace, Sonia Mansfield.
Only some of those things are true. With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and delusional nerd, Christopher Allen Smith. In this week's episode, we talk about Amy Schumer and Dave Chappelle's comedy specials on Netflix. Are they funny? One of them is. In our second segment, we get random and talk about a variety of things we're dorking out about right now, including some podcasts and TV shows and websites. And we end our show with our favorite headlines, Justice League, Star Wars, and the hashtag GOPDND. We've got a lot to dork out about this week, so let's get this podcast started.
Topic 1. You may have noticed, we here at the Dorking Out Show may have fallen into a little bit of a rut lately. While we pride ourselves on liking every kind of story, from books like War and Peace to podcasts, movies and TV, you may be forgiven for thinking we're illiterate because we only pretty much talk about TV and movies. Well, that changes today. Today we're not talking about books, which you might have suspected from this misdirect of an intro. Today we are talking about the recent waves of specials by big-name comedians brought to us mainly by Netflix. The streaming juggernaut, not technically television, has committed to releasing a new hour-long special from a major comedian every week for the rest of 2017. In recent weeks, Amy Schumer made headlines by releasing her Leather special on Netflix, and the reviews were not fantastic. Then this week, Dave Chappelle, maybe the greatest living comedian, drops not one, but 2 hour-long specials after keeping on the down low for the last 10 years. In the last few months, there have been new hours from long-running comedians like Bill Burr and new breakout stars like Amy Wong. So what do comedians bring to the table other kinds of storytelling lacks, especially in this day and age? And what do we think of these 2 high-profile appearances? Well, that's why we're talking about stand-up in this segment of Dorking Out. Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
I was a little frustrated this week.
Okay.
I had the impression of, I go on Reddit quite a bit, but I am very well aware of the kind of cesspool that it kind of is.
I never go on Reddit.
And sometimes it's that's what I found is you gotta find if you go into the wrong subreddits, it's just a train wreck. Anyway, and one of the things is every once in a while, like a lot of different communities on the web, they just tee off on somebody, and holy cow, have they gone off on Amy Schumer. And it seems like it's...
In the past, always? Like they just don't like her, or...
I don't know. I have heard kind of they don't like her or whatever, but I've never really paid attention to it. There's a great meme on Reddit where... Or it's actually on the web a lot, kind of like you're away from the web and then you come back and there's a new meme out there.
Right.
And you don't get it, and there's this one with Gandalf where he's kind of looking all confused and like... none of this is familiar to me.
Right.
Anyway, I know that's not the right name of the meme, but I don't care. Save your emails, nerds. Anyway, and I had the impression of kind of coming back to Reddit over the last couple of weeks and like, wow, everybody is going off on Amy Schumer. What the hell's going on?
Right.
And it's like, oh, she's not funny. Oh, she's not this. And I was kind of all up in arms. Like, yeah, she's funny. I've been hearing this for years. She has this fantastic show. Trainwreck was a good movie. I think her kind of redo of 12 Angry Men for her show is maybe one of the funniest half hours of comedy I've seen in the last 20 years. So I was all keyed up to defend her and to, go to the ramparts for Amy Schumer. And then I watched the episode, and my wife made me turn it off 8 minutes in because, holy smokes, it sucked.
Yeah, I actually took a note of the first point I actually laughed in the special, and I didn't laugh out loud until the 24-minute mark.
Oh, snap.
And it's, it's
66 minutes altogether, I think.
Her special is the equivalent of a double-spaced term paper with extra large font.
Yeah.
Like, it's lazy, and it just has this, like, I already know you love me, so I'm not trying really hard vibe about it. Like, it had, like, there wasn't really jokes. It was, like, the idea of jokes.
Oh,
you
wow,
know?
that's
And then,
right.
pausing for laughter and applause where there isn't any.
Yeah.
And it's awkward to watch. And you asked me, you're like, why would she even put this out there?
Yeah.
Because it is really awkward to watch.
It's awful.
I was really disappointed. I think Amy Schumer's really funny. I loved her show, just like you. I love her old stand-up. Trainwreck was one of my favorite movies the year it came out. I'm super disappointed. This is really, really lame. It's just a bunch of dirty vagina jokes, basically. No, I wish I hadn't said dirty vagina, but
well, that's
I'm
the
sorry.
thing. Is you're right in both instances.
Right.
You're right if there's a comma between dirty and vagina jokes. You're right if there's no comma between dirty and vagina, because this is it's shockingly not good.
Yeah.
Like there were long stretch. My wife and I watched this before we were even thinking about putting this on the podcast, and she was not really a fan of it. She just didn't think it was funny, and we were paying attention to other stuff. So we was like, all right, let's forget this. So when you and I decided to talk about comedians on the podcast, we said, all right, we're going to power through. We're going to watch the rest. And she pointed out to me how many times there were just long stretches of no laughter or kind of like polite laughter.
Right.
Like, hey.
Like pity laughter.
Yeah, which was just excruciating to listen to.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, and George Carlin did this a little bit sometimes, and this is one of the things that irritated him about me, even though I am not about to compare George Carlin with Amy Schumer, is sometimes he would make a joke, and then he'd essentially make the same punchline, kind of repeat the punchline, but with slightly different words. Mm-hmm. Here, there were some jokes where Amy Schumer hit the punchline like 3 or 4 times.
Right.
And it was just, there was no... The thing that I liked, for, one of the reasons I want to talk about this is when the things comedians can do for kind of examining cultures, they have the freedom to say anything. Mm-hmm. They have the freedom to kind of go off in weird, harebrained directions that might seem crazy for a while, but then if you're a good comedian, you can kind of wrap it all back in.
Right.
You set up a joke in the first 10 minutes and you pay it off 50 minutes later, and it's very elegant, and that's what separates just regular nightclub comedians from true top-of-the-line comedians. But there was nothing here. There was no through line. There was no... I don't know what was going on.
I just kept coming back to lazy. Like,
Yeah.
It was just super lazy. Like, I'm like, did she have, like, a contractual obligation to put out this special?
Yeah.
Because it seemed half-assed
Yeah.
to me. I was disappointed.
And that's the thing that's so crazy is with a lot of comedians, especially on Netflix, I think one of the drawbacks of Netflix's strategy is they're grabbing comedians. It's kind of like the comedy boom in the 80s where if you had 5 minutes, you could probably get on one of the, what was that show on the A&E had a show, Night at the Improv or whatever, and then
Evening at the Improv.
Yeah, Evening in the Improv.
Right.
And then VH1 had some show with Rosie O'Donnell.
Right.
Which is, I think, where most people
back in the
met her.
80s and in the 90s, stand-up comedy was like HBO's thing.
Yeah.
Like, they had like a special every week. They had like the half-hour comedy hour.
Yeah.
And like that was the thing. Like, you wanted an HBO showcase for your stuff. That was
Right.
like, you wanted to get on the Tonight Show and you want HBO.
And you want your
at
hour
some
long on
point,
HBO.
Yeah.
Right.
And then like HBO does like The Sopranos starts winning Emmys and is like with the comedy specials.
Right.
And Netflix was like, well, I'll just take that from you.
Exactly.
And that's their thing. Like, they're planning to put out like one. I forget how often they're planning to do it.
I think it's one a week, and Louis C.K. has one.
Louis C.K. is next, and then after that they're doing Sarah Silverman, Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, and they already have stuff from like Jim Gaffigan, and Bill Burr, and Trevor Noah.
Yeah, they are not playing around, but now I do have to wonder, because what I was gonna say is, at that time. And even now with Netflix is some of these comedians don't necessarily deserve an hour-long special because they're not tight. If a lot of people are not familiar with kind of how comedians work, is a lot of times what they'll do is they'll do an hour-long special, then they'll go out on the road and build up a good 5 minutes and keep working so they have 10.
Right.
And then when they get to, 65 or 70 minutes of diamond tight, really polished stuff,
right.
They'll do their next thing. And but sometimes comedians just are not skilled enough, like in every kind of endeavor.
I wouldn't even say it's that she's not skilled enough. She is skilled enough. I think she's been making movies. She's been making her show. She's probably not making the rounds. She's not hitting the clubs. She's not working
exactly
on her material. And then she's half-assing it with like these jokes that like, I hear from my lady friends. And I was like, I don't want to pay. Like, if I was paying to see the Amy Schumer's act, I would be pissed.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say, is because I have kind of delved into some of these hour-long shows, and it's just, we get through it, or my wife and I are watching it, and it's like, okay, it's fine. It's not anything to write home about, but okay, so we'll stop. What's different about Amy Schumer, I think, is she has the goods. She has delivered the goods, and I can't remember the last time a comedian had, one special that was way up here and one special that was this far down in the dumps.
Right.
And crazy. I mean, or not crazy. It's just shocking how bad it is. I will definitely admit, and the reason I brought up the Reddit thing is it's always irritating when the biggest critics that you're tired of hearing, you find yourself kind of agreeing with.
Right.
Because
well, a lot of people in Reddit are probably, they don't like her because she's a woman and she doesn't look the way they want her to look, so she needs to just be quiet. And that's,
exactly.
That's not what's going on here. It's not like I watch the special and I'm like, I wish she was prettier. Like, no, I wish she was funnier. That's all. I was disappointed. She's super funny, just not in the special. And you mentioned the stuff about like going out on the road and working on your act and like really fine tuning it and getting it really tight. And I think that's why the first Chappelle one is so funny. That's the one.
Let's talk about
The Age of Spin.
Yeah, let's
live
switch
at the
over to
Hollywood Palladium.
Which is this last Monday, Dave Chappelle dropped 2 new hour-long specials on the same night, which no one has ever done before.
Right.
And I remember kind of like going home and thinking, okay, honey, tonight's Dave Chappelle night, because we think he's the funniest comedian. I think he's the funniest comedian since, I don't even know what, 1980s Jerry Seinfeld or like Richard Pryor or, top of his game.
I was a Carlin girl. I'm a big fan of George Carlin. I do
like Carlin, but for me, he kind of goes up and down and meanders a little bit.
I always love
him. But there's just something about the way Dave Chappelle delivers.
Dave Chappelle's first one is really tight. Like, and I know for a fact that like he did a lot of secret like shows here in the city, in San Francisco and Oakland and things like that, really working on that act.
Right.
Like, he wasn't half-assing it. Like, he really worked it. Like, he's a professional.
Yeah.
And you can... And it has, like, a beginning, a middle, and an end. He ties it all together with, like, the 4 different times he's met O.J. Simpson.
That's right.
Like there's a common thread through all of it.
Right.
It's really smart. He's
Right.
really smart.
Yeah.
You know, and he just always, like, he always has a lot to say about, like, you know, about race and
Right.
sex and pop culture and music and, like, everything. And I was so happy to see him. And there is a little bit of, like, kind of a grumpy old man thing about him, but I really liked it. And one of the other things, too, was I kept thinking of Eddie Murphy's Raw. Do you remember Eddie Murphy's Raw?
Yeah.
That was his one of his leather specials.
That's right.
And it was the second one. So it's not Delirious, the one that, like, everyone's, like, you know, with, like, ice cream and, like, all that. It's the second one where he's, like, rich and famous, and he comes out and he's like, hey, every chick wants to sleep with me and take half my money and blah, blah, blah. And, like, no one can relate to that.
Right.
And Dave Chappelle absolutely could have done that. Like, he could come out and, like, and there is, like, stuff about, like, we talked about this before, like, he gets pulled over by the police and he's like, well, nothing's gonna happen to me because I'm Dave Chappelle.
That's right.
You know, like, there is, like, you know, he, like, casually mentions, like, you know, his friend Chris Rock, or,
And
you
going
know,
to the Oscars and all
going
that
to
stuff.
the Oscars.
But he makes it a relatable joke about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that time your friend calls you and gets you into trouble when you're supposed to go to work.
Right.
But you're doing this other thing.
Right. Or,
And
like, his interaction with Kevin Hart. And you were
Oh.
saying how it was, like, it's less about, like,
It's less
about, like, comedian envy, because
Right.
Kevin Hart has it, like, going on right now. It was
Right.
more about, like, Dave Chappelle's son worships Kevin Hart and
Right.
being, like, the dad that's, like,
Yeah.
you know, why don't you like me as much as you like Kevin Hart? Like, kind
Exactly.
of, like, so he takes these things that are, like, could be, like, big celebrity problems, and he brings them down to, like, where we can all relate.
Yeah.
And that's a good storyteller.
Yeah. Well, it's a good storyteller, but that is kind of one of the things. And what's really interesting is, maybe this is one of the reasons that I wasn't a big fan of the Amy Schumer thing, is watching them back to back. There's a lot of overlap in the kind of things. You know, a lot of things that a lot of Amy Schumer's critics say, oh, well, she just makes vagina jokes, and that's what bad female comedians always do. They just talk about their vagina. And then you watch Dave Chappelle, and there's a lot of him swinging the mic around like his penis.
Right.
But he is really funny.
Yeah.
And she is just kind of flat.
It's disappointing because now it's just going to be one of those specials that jerks in a subreddit, like, can, like, point to.
Right.
As, see?
Yeah.
Like, this is what female comedians are like. They all make jokes about vaginas.
That's
like,
that's
and
right.
that's not
not
what female comedians do. And it's not always what Amy Schumer does. And it's just unfortunate. It's like she played into, like, the worst stereotype of herself.
Right. And but the thing that she does, and the thing that comedians can do, and this is why I was so happy to see Dave Chappelle, and why I really like watching these hour-long specials, is the things comedians can do that no other real art form, I think, can do, is they can look at the world around us from almost like an everyman perspective, or just kind of BSing off the top of your head perspective, and look at things that seem weird or seem strange, or that you're kind of aren't weird or strange, but they're new to you, so you react to them in a weird way, you know. And sometimes that can work out not so great. Like when you go back and look at some of the ways that, you know, Eddie Murphy talked about gays and all that stuff, it's crazy. But at the time, sorry everybody from 2017, but that was the culture.
Yeah.
And there's a reason he could pack the biggest arenas in America with people screaming and with laughter saying that stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's some stuff in the Chappelle's specials, and the 2 specials, that they're not going to age well.
See, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to age well, because he's not even saying, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. His thing literally is, my heart's with this, but it's new to me. You know, like one of the things he was talking about that I think has gotten him a lot of heat online that and maybe it's just me being grumpy, is the kind of the recent switch around transgender people and pronouns.
I will say, like, I think I'm trying to remember which special it's in. Is it in the first one?
Oh.
Or is it in the Deep in the Heart of Texas
I think
one?
it's Deep in the Heart of Texas.
Because that one's actually from, like, 2015, I think. And I was like, God, you know, so much has changed, like, even since then.
Yeah.
That I was like, it already hasn't aged well.
See, I don't...
In a way. But, like, but like I said to you before, like, I don't... Like, people were mad. And they're like, he's homophobic or whatever. And I was like, that's 100% not what was going on there. Like, what I saw was, like, there's no hate there.
Right.
He really, like, his heart is, like, with these people. Like, he's like, I understand.
Yeah.
You know, what it's like to be discriminated against. I get it. I feel like it's someone that he's trying to understand.
Yeah.
And he's working it out on stage. And we ask our comedians to be honest and brave and insightful, and when they do these things and like really lay it out there, we're like, how dare you?
Exactly.
You need to be exactly 100% like on point, politically correct all the time.
We're gonna go politically correct, and you know, a lot of people on the right kind of run up the flag of political correctness, and I don't really listen to it. But we do have to be honest with ourselves. There is a contingent on the left or on the right, but mainly on the left, that, you know, they're going to target you if you say the wrong thing. Or you know, one of the jokes he said was, you know, my heart's with you guys. I'm doing this, but, you know, now I got to change up my whole pronoun game.
And by the way, it's a joke.
Well,
it's just a joke.
It is a joke. And that's the other thing is, these are not the thing that, you know, there are comedians that have said some pretty crazy and nut stuff. Right. You know, Tracy Morgan said some stuff about gay people. You know, Michael Richards 10 years ago just kind of had a meltdown on stage. But none of these people, I think the reason that I'm kind of so defending of comedians, even when they're offensive, even when they're tone deaf, even when they're wrong, is because they're not a politician that has power over us. They're not They're not head of a company that can affect things in either the marketplace or, you know, with legislation. They're not considered novelists that take 2 years to put out a piece of work and think through every line. They are essentially the funny person at the end of the bar that we all talk to of our society. And if they're gonna getting smothered or stamped on, I think that is not good. So I could see, I think, I
understand the sensitivity. Like, I don't want to sound like I don't. I do understand the sensitivity. Like I said to you, like, if he went up there and made a bunch of jokes about, like, autism, like, I would be uncomfortable. I would not like that. It would probably make me mad. So, like, I understand. But I don't think there was, like, hate there. Yeah. And I really do think that, like, he was just trying... I think he really is, like, trying to understand, like, what's next and how do I do this? And and jokes like that can, like, bring people together and raise awareness and be like, yeah, like, I should, you know, try to use the right pronouns. But yeah, it can be hard. Yeah. And I think that's what he's saying. Like, how do I say the right things all the time?
Right, exactly.
That's kind of the joke.
That is kind of
like,
the joke.
Because he's, like, running over to, like, help this person, basically, in the joke. And he didn't use the right pronoun. And he didn't mean it to be like, I'm totally disrespecting the person. Like, no, he is fine with being whoever you want to be. It was, he was trying to help them. Right. And the wrong pronoun came out. That's kind of the joke.
Well, that's kind of the point. And I think that's why what he is saying, and a comedian's examination of these things is a little bit more on point than kind of their critique of him. And the critique, you know, there have been, you know, the usual tweets, the usual calls for boycotts, the usual, people pissed off on advocacy blogs,
Right.
Going after him, is nothing that he can say, nothing that anyone can say now is going to look diamond tight 50 years from now.
Right.
Nothing. We can talk about all the pronouns and whatever that we want to right now. The passage of time is going to make us all look like bigots one way or another. And he's actually grappling with that. I think this way. Things have changed. Now I'm trying to think the new way. And they're kind of pretending like, oh, well, now in 2017 we have it all figured out. So here's the list of things you could say. Because if you go back, 80 years, it was, no, you don't say the N-word, you say Negro.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what the enlightened
Right.
people. And now, obviously, if you say that, you could hear the hitch in my voice as I said Negro. If you said that in any kind of company, it would be
right.
I would get yelled at, and rightfully so. So it's almost, and I think I am getting tired. And this is something that we bring up on the show a lot, of the professionally irritated or the professionally outraged
what's
people.
the internet outraged about today?
Exactly.
Which was going to be a reoccurring segment on our show.
That's right. So, I really, this is a long, long way of saying I am very happy that Dave Chappelle is back. I also, for one, it's funny, on our first podcast, we talked about the difficulty of liking an artist that is screwed up in their, personal lives, or done something awful. And my example was Bill Cosby, and his bit on Bill Cosby gets very offensive.
Yeah.
But also, I think, for me, kind of hits the truth of the whole awful quagmire that's going on with him. And where does your love stop and your horror start?
Yeah.
Because
he's like, he talks about, like, Bill Cosby was a huge influence on him.
He was.
So you can understand where he's coming from. And he says, like, it's like finding out that chocolate ice cream raped 54 people. Like, it's so disappointing. And I'm like, it's a really, it is, he has like a really interesting discussion. Like, he really shares like an interesting insight into that about, like, where do we draw the line? Chris Rock had a similar one that he did a couple, oh my God, it was probably like 15 years ago or something, about Michael Jackson. It was like, about like, right. We all love Michael Jackson so much that we let the first kid slide.
That's right.
But then when it happened again, we had to we had to put our foot down, you know, that sort of thing. And it's like, it's still a funny joke.
I'm sorry, it is. That's right. One, it's a funny joke, but two, you're not gonna see that kind of observation in a think piece on Slate. You're not gonna see that kind of observation in an op-ed in the New York Times. That kind of true observation of trying to wrap your head around this awful stuff can only come from comedians. And I think that's why, A, I'm so glad that Dave Chappelle's back. B, that he's firing at the top of his game. Mm-hmm. And C, this is...
Yeah, I miss that guy.
I'm
glad he's back.
Yeah, and I think he's supposed to be coming out with a third one later this year, or I could be wrong about that.
That I don't know.
I think he was supposed to do 3 things for Netflix, and one of them is still to come. But anyway, is there anything else that you would like to say about Dave Chappelle, Amy Schumer, or...
I would say, better luck next time, Amy. Really. Ouch. Step up your game. Come on.
All right, and if you are a feminist comedy lover, I know that I don't need to tell you about Amy Wong, but go see Amy Wong's special on Netflix. It is
Ali
hilarious.
Wong.
Oh, Ali Wong. I guess I confused her with Amy Tan. All right, because I am awful.
Are you going to delete that?
Nope. It's staying in.
What are we dorking out about this week? It's only taken us 40 episodes to realize that we should do a segment called Dorking Out, in which we share the random things we're dorking out about. Only 40 episodes.
We didn't think this through at all.
Not everything we're watching, listening to, reading needs like an entire segment. So we're just gonna, every once in a while, we're gonna do a little grab bag. And that's what we're doing today. And we're just gonna share like a few things that we're really into right now. So do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I want you to go first because I'm not dorking out about all that many things. You've got 3, I've got 2. Why don't you go first?
Okay, so I'm going to start with a website that I really like called Wonkette.com. And it's kind of a political gossipy site. It's not gossipy. Let me rephrase that. Let me start at the beginning.
Isn't it a little gossipy? I thought
It's
it
not.
was.
It's written like a celebrity. That's what I'm trying to say. It's written like a celebrity gossip site.
This is what This is what happens when we don't prepare.
I'll say after our current president was elected and declared everything except Fox News to be fake news, I signed up for the New York Times, and I have access to the entire website. I get the Sunday edition the old-fashioned way, like on paper, and every Sunday I read the paper and drink coffee, and it's heaven. The New York Times is awesome. But sometimes I need like a little
Sarcastic wise
ass. I need some wise ass with my news. Like, because there's a lot of bad news out there. And I need something else. And that's when I read Wonkette, which covers politics in a fun, gossipy, delisted sort of way that I really like and find myself checking like at least once a day.
Why can't Thomas Friedman be more sarcastic?
So like, it's written like,
about...
delisted.com or like the superficial or,
right.
Just, it's really snarky and fun. And sometimes you just need a little bit of that to deal with all the news.
Yes. All right. Cool. Excuse me. Pardon me. I am burping up some of Sonia's fantastic spaghetti.
You're going to make our listeners sick.
I am sorry in several different ways for what is happening with this podcast. No, I am here with my first pick, which is the huge sensation. That's right. A moment ago, Sonia came within a hair's breadth of recommending the New York Times, in case you hadn't heard of it. Now I am recommending...
I didn't.
No, you didn't.
I didn't recommend...
I'm just
Have
teasing.
you guys heard of the New York Times? It is awesome.
Exactly. Now I am in the position that Sonia just sarcastically talked about, which is I'm in the position of recommending, or maybe not recommending, what has been at the top of the podcasting charts for the last 6 weeks, Dan Taberski's Missing Richard Simmons podcast.
I have not listened to it. I know what it is, but I haven't listened to it.
Well, here's what's interesting. And Dan Taberski, he's a documentary filmmaker, and the podcast is fantastic. It is a very well done, very edited, very polished podcast.
The opposite of this, then.
Exactly. The very opposite of this. In fact, so opposite that last week I would like to apologize for leaving in some of our editing notes and forgetting to take them out. So,
and if you didn't listen last week, you should listen to last week's.
You should not. Last week's might not be up there by the time you hear this. But
that
anyway,
is not true.
Point is, Dan Taberski has done this really polished thing, and what he was is kind of he went to Richard Simmons' fitness class in Hollywood. They were kind of getting, pretty friendly, and then in 2014, Richard Simmons stopped going to class, stopped talking to a bunch of people who he was friends with, and just kind of vanished. And over the next 3 years, all these rumors have kind of bubbled up about, what's going on with him. And Dan kind of delves into them almost in this serial-like, there's this new unraveling a mystery genre of podcasts,
Yeah.
nonfiction podcasts. And I have to say, what's fascinating about it is, for me at least, and I think the New York Times is kind of wrote an editorial about this, is there's definitely a creepy stalker thing for me going on in this. Now, a lot of people think Dan Taberski hasn't, crossed any lines or anything, but for me, by the middle of episode 3, there are 6 episodes. By the middle of episode 3, we kind of have started to figure out kind of what's going on with Richard Simmons, but you could see that Dan was still wanting to kind of like have some more episode of the podcast. So he's like, well, this seems like a reasonable explanation for why somebody would just cut off all the people that they've been talking to and do X, Y, and Z. But is it really what's going on? Next week, I'm going to blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And it's just, and so by the 5th episode, it's kind of like, we have the answer, you just don't want to accept it, buddy.
So everyone's ready to move on.
It's kind of,
except for the host?
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating because you see the host kind of being honest, but it's kind of like, are they deluding themselves? Are they just playing dumb because they want to string out the podcast or whatever? And then at the end, it does actually have a pretty good ending, but it is that kind of wraps things up in a satisfying way, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it is an interesting examination of this whole let's solve a mystery serial thing that's been happening for the last 4 or 5 years, and kind of what happens when you're trying to, quote-unquote, solve a mystery that, A, might not really be that much of a mystery, and B, is kind of inconsequential even if you do solve the mystery. So C, you're putting all this time and effort and pressure to paying attention to somebody that really probably just wants to be left alone. So it's a fascinating, interesting examination of what we like about podcasts, what we like about certain trends in podcasts.
Right.
But also it's a very slick, very polished podcast that also is a pretty interesting love letter to what, for the last 30 years has been kind of this ridiculous presence in pop culture, Richard Simmons, and why we should kind of care about him and should kind of miss him. And it's just very interesting. So.
Would I like it?
I think you would. Definitely. I don't know. Sometimes you're grumpy. Maybe you wouldn't. I don't know.
Well, I think, is it this week? S-Town comes out?
It is.
So I will be probably pretty focused on that. So missing Richard Simmons is going to have to wait.
It's going to have to wait. So, actually, yeah, that is a good thing. We're just going to throw this in the middle. S-Town drops on Tuesday. We're going to be talking about all 8 episodes. How many episodes are there?
I don't know.
Actually, now that I think about it, we don't know. We're going to be talking about S-Town on next week's podcast. So make sure, speaking of Serial, make sure you listen to the Serial spinoff, S-Town, which we now know...
7 episodes.
7 episodes.
There you go.
Get ready. You've got your homework. Sonia Mansfield, what is the other thing that what is another thing you were dorking out about?
So since we're talking about podcasts, I'll go with this one. I am a big fan of a podcast called How Is This Movie? And it's hosted by Dana Buckler. And it's a podcast that details basically how a movie got made, from the idea through the production and the reception. And they're they're pretty short. It's about, they're maybe like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And I love the amount of research that goes into every episode. It's just crazy impressive.
You know what I just realized?
It's the opposite of what we do. No, I'm kidding. But he recently did one about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that was really great. He did a 3-part series about Titanic.
Which I've listened to, and it's great.
Yeah, which everyone knows had an epic story on, how it was made.
Right.
So, if you love movies, and since you're listening to this podcast, I suspect you do.
Nope.
You should probably listen to How Is This Movie? It's a really great podcast.
It is, and I just, as you were talking about, I just realized one of the things I like about How Is This Movie, it's like a version of You Must Remember This, but it talks about more modern stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like 30s through the 60s stuff. It's like 70s, 80s, 90s, and today.
He also just did an episode about Bill Paxton that was really good, talking about some of his greatest hits, if you will.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
and then
I'll have to check
did
that
you
out.
have another pick?
I did have another pick, which is War and Peace, because last
Hey,
week's episode...
have you guys heard of this book called War and Peace?
That's right. Here's the thing, is last week's episode, to my ear, sounded so awful on an audio technical level that I suspect there's a good chunk of our listening audience that never got to the end where we announced that we're going to be... We're going to be reading over the next couple months, probably through the summer, Leo Tolstoy's epic novel of the invasion of Russia by Napoleon, War and Peace, in case you didn't know what War and Peace was like. War and Peace.
First there was war, and then there was peace.
That's right.
The end.
I love that you're being sarcastic about what might be the greatest novel ever written by humans.
I've never read it.
Neither have I. However, I'm going to fix that.
I'm
over
not.
the next 6 months.
I'm not.
Now, the reason I did this is I realized that Pillars of the Earth, one of the my favorite books that I've talked about on this podcast before, is about 41 hours to listen to. Mm-hmm. War and Peace is 61. So it's like, oh, okay, it's not, that much bigger, so I may as well try it. Here's what I'm doing, and you can play along at home too. You go to the War and Peace Wikipedia page. You read up on all the characters so you can kind of get everything, because this is a huge book. It's a significant undertaking. But you could do it.
Is there any, do they go to wizarding school at all?
No, not everything. And this is why one of the reasons I'm doing it. Not everything has to have spaceships and wizards. However, this does have Frenchmen getting shot, so there's that. It has Napoleon, so it's got a great villain, and it's got war right in the title. Sonia,
and peace.
Now that I think about it, Star Wars is one of your favorite things. This has got half of your favorite things right in the title.
War is not really my favorite thing.
That's not what your viewing habits tell me. But whatever. Anyway, so please tweet me, send us email, post on our Facebook. Are you going to read War and Peace with me? I'm actually going to listen to it over the next X amount of months, and I'm going to try to persuade Sonia.
It's not going to work.
To do it because she wants to be learned and smart.
I don't. I'm like, I really don't. I don't care.
All right. She wants to remain stupid.
Yes.
Oh, did I just say that? I'm sorry. Anyway, perhaps after I've read War and Peace, I will know to choose my words better and be more polite. Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
What is your third and final?
Because I did I did my homework. I picked 3.
Yeah, it's true. What's the next one?
So the third one is, sometimes I want to turn on the TV and just be wowed by pretty pictures. Like, I don't want to think too hard. Mm-hmm. I don't want to read War and Peace.
No kidding.
So one of the things I love to watch is a show on Netflix called Chef's Table. That's not what I'm dorking out about, but I'm mentioning it because it's just like they interview chefs and they tell their stories and how they cook their food and why they cook their food and things like that.
First, I go into the kitchen.
Yeah.
Then I get a pan.
There's a chef and there's a table. The end. And it's just one of those things that you come home and it's not political, it's not news, it's not timely at all. It's just pictures. And that's why I super love Planet Earth 2 on BBC America right now. I called it Planet Earth, right?
You did.
Okay.
Here's
By the whole week I've been calling it Animal Planet 2.
Here's why I'm silently reacting is because in our show notes she wrote Animal Planet 2. And I've been waiting for her to see if she's going to blow it. And I was ready to jump right on her if she blew it, but she didn't blow it. Nevertheless, I still found a way to derail this last choice of hers.
That's really okay.
By this ridiculous digression about something she didn't say.
I love Animal Planet 2. No, I love Planet Earth 2. I love the first one. I love the Blue Planet. I love nature documentaries. I think they're super interesting and fun. And this is on BBC America right now. I'm sure it's on demand if you guys want to go back and watch it. And I'm just so in awe of the video footage they are able to get on this show. Like, how close they are to get to these animals, their use of drones and things like that. I need to watch like a making of.
Definitely.
Because I think it would probably be really amazing. And I just love the stories they're telling with each part of the world they focus on. It's just amazingly well done. Have you watched any of it?
I've watched some of Animal Planet, and I've watched some of Animal...
You watched some of Animal Planet?
Oh my God!
Did you watch some of Animal Planet 2?
I did watch Animal Planet 2. That's where the meerkats took control of the planet from the apes in the Battle of the Serengeti. It was the most spectacular 2 hours of a made-up documentary that I've ever seen.
Did you?
I've seen Planet Earth.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. And what's amazing about it is everybody talks about how gorgeous it is.
Yeah.
This might be the most beautiful documentary ever made.
It is.
It is just...
It's gorgeous to look at.
It is insane. Like, completely indescribable how good this thing looks. And it takes like 5 years to make this whole series or something, doesn't it? I don't even want to think about how... much money it costs, because what it looks like is they take the best cinematographers working in documentaries ever, send them out to sit in a field in Africa for 2 years just to get 20 shots, but those 20 shots are so ridiculously gorgeous.
People probably saw there was some that went some footage that went viral like earlier this year where like a lizard was trying to run across the beach to its like it hatches from its egg, and then it's trying to run across the beach to be with like the other lizards, and all these snakes come out. Have you seen this one?
I've heard about it.
It's like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, you've never seen so many snakes.
Wow.
It's like from The Simpsons, like Snake Whacking Day or whatever. Like, it's just so many snakes, and they all come out, and they're chasing this lizard, and you're like, I was like literally on the edge of my seat watching it, like, run! Like, you just want it to get away. So it's so exciting the way they shoot it. It's just such an amazing documentary. I can't recommend it enough. And it is one of the things that I am definitely dorking out about. And I've been talking about it nonstop for like a month.
That's right. So that's Animal Planet 2.
Planet Earth 2.
Planet of the Meerkats. Planet Earth 2. All right. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, let's move on to favorite headlines.
That brings us to favorite headlines, and who is going to introduce this segment? Apparently, it's me. So,
I introduced the last one.
You did, that's true. First thing we're going to talk about very quickly is for the entire run of this show, that started a couple months after the DC Extended Universe release of Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. There's been a running discussion about Marvel movies and how they're doing everything so well and how everything is so great, and what is up with DC and things being so screwed up. There seemed to be some sort of consensus within Warner Brothers in late 2016 that they were off on the wrong track. They were screwing things up, so they had to fix some stuff. Everybody was looking, Sonia Mansfield among them, with hope at maybe the June release of Wonder Woman would make things interesting and fun and light and enjoyable. And the other movie that's coming out this year is Zack Snyder's Justice League, which just dropped a trailer. And the reason that it's here as one of my favorite headlines is it gives us an indication of, is this course correction going to happen? What is the tone? What is the tenor of the trailer that they're putting out to get people excited for this new movie? Sonia Mansfield has not seen Batman vs. Superman. She's very excited for
Wonder Woman.
What was your reaction to the Justice League trailer?
I watched it and thought, I'm sure it sure does look like Suicide Squad, basically, is what I thought. Like, it looks exactly like Suicide Squad. Like, to the music and everything. And I didn't like Suicide Squad. I thought it was a bad movie. Is this something you really want to emulate? But it did make a ton of money. And it is an Oscar winner now. So I guess I'm wrong. I'm wrong, right? It's a good movie now. So it made money and it won an Oscar for makeup and hair. So it must be good.
That's the thing is
the Oscars wouldn't lie.
Oscars don't denote goodness. They denote achievements, especially an Oscar like makeup, where, and I think this is proof of it, the makeup was fantastic. The movie was not so good, but the makeup was Oscar-worthy makeup, so there you go. There's your Oscar. I am with you. I saw a headline on the internet somewhere this week, which was essentially the Justice League trailer is exactly what you would expect it to be. It's got, grungy guitar riffs. It's got kind of a metal version of the Beatles Come Together playing throughout it. It looks like Zack Snyder's love of rock and roll or, shredding guitars is going to be inflicted on Justice League. And I
was pretty unimpressed with what I saw.
I'm not going to say I was not overwhelmed. I'm not going to say I was underwhelmed. I was perfectly whelmed. So there's that. Nothing more to say.
I'm sure we'll get into this more on a Dorking Out about trailers in the near future.
Yes. Peter, if you're listening, pick up your phone. Which brings us to our second favorite headline. Star Wars into the 2030s.
I'm pretty excited about this. Are you not excited about this?
No, I am excited about this. But it's kind of like there's... Recently... Bob Iger, head of Disney, has been he's been giving several speeches where he talked a little bit about, and we have a link in our show notes to this. He talked a little bit about what's going on with the Han Solo movie and kind of let a little bit of information about what the kind of plot details of that are. Nothing too spoilery, but it was interesting. Then he said that there's been some questions about what's going to be going on with the saga films, after episode 9. Is there going to be an episode 10, 11, 12? And what he said is that Disney has plans for Star Wars for the next 10 to 15 years. So that is 10 to 15 theoretical Star Wars movies. Because they've already said previously that they want to be knocking these out one a year until who knows when.
Right.
So,
can you imagine there was a time when we didn't get a Star Wars movie every year?
There was a time when we didn't get a Star Wars movie every 5 years.
Right.
There was a time before 1977.
We just had to keep watching the old ones over and over because we didn't get new ones.
That's right. And we were never going to get new ones.
Never.
I was there in the late 80s, early 90s when Lucas said, that's it, we're done. Forever. No more Star Wars movies are ever going to be made. I was there in the dark times.
He just took a swig of bourbon.
That's right. Otherwise known as Coke Zero. But
out of my Force Awakens glass.
That's right. So we are longtime Star Wars fans here. So that is just a holy smokes headline. Oh, the other thing he said was...
He also said that they are not changing anything about Episode 8 due to the death of Carrie Fisher, which I guess then kind of puts it back on, whoever's directing Episode 9.
That's right.
It's like, hey, this is your problem.
There you go.
It's future director's problem, not my problem.
That's right.
Work it out.
Which I believe Rian Johnson is written and directed Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and I think he's writing Episode 9, if I remember correctly.
That I don't know.
So, anyway.
I'll take your word for it.
Good. Excuse me. Pardon me If you're at work listening to this right now, try not to yawn and look like you're bored at work. I don't want to get you fired. Sonia Mansfield, what is your favorite headline of the week?
So my favorite headline, it's really more like my favorite hashtag of the week. My husband introduced this to me. There is a hashtag going on this past week called GOP D&D, and it's basically people changing Republican strategies into D&D lingo, and I've been reading them and laughing and giggling. I just think it's so awesome, and I put a link in our show notes because I am into it.
This might be the most appropriate headline.
Like the one I read to you that I thought was so funny. It says DM. The villagers made you their leader, believing that you'll fight the oppressive warlords. GOP. I give the overlords tax breaks.
This might be the most appropriate Dorking Out headline that's ever been on Dorking Out.
Yes.
It mentions D&D, deep nerdy D&D rules.
Yeah, somebody also like rewrote like D&D basic rules in GOP lingo, so it's like experience points are now purchased using gold pieces instead of being earned by defeating monsters or completing quests, and about like how you divide it up. It goes to like it's decided by level, so the higher level characters get all the money and everyone else suffers.
So that's a little bit of, as much as we try to shy away from politics on here, sometimes something is just too sweet. It's just too good.
And
we can't help it.
Yeah. And it fits right in our like sweet little nerdy spot there.
That's right. So, Sonia Mansfield, is there anything that you would like to say before we get out of here?
Just that I'm totally not going to be reading War and Peace. Sorry.
We shall see what the future holds. But for right now,
I'll just say goodbye.
Bye!
The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about the Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes. We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.